Welcome, everybody, back to OTT Executive Podcast. I'm Brian Mahoney, your host, the CEO of Trend Research, and the president of the OTT Executive Community. I'm thrilled to have Srini here today because we've been friends for a long time. Actually, you started your company, Srini, right around the time I started mine, 2008, I think, right?
Absolutely.
And so we're going to spend the next 45 minutes or so just getting to know Srini, his background, his views on the industry. There's a lot to talk about. So let's jump right into it. Srini, you need no introduction, but for those that might be new to your personal brand, who are you and what do you do?
So first, thank you so much, Brian. Thanks for having me here. As always, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you. Personal background. I'm Srini. Go by Srini K.A. last name, Srini first name. One of the co-founders of Amagi. I'm also its chief revenue officer. For those of you that are not familiar with Amagi, Amagi is a media technology SaaS company that helps content partners, television networks, sports rights owners to help create channels for linear or for fast, distribute them anywhere that they distribute their content anywhere they want, whether it's on traditional cable satellite services, fast services, SVOD, AVOD platforms, and monetize them. That's essentially what we do. We are one of the largest, if not the largest, media technology SaaS companies globally. Personal background: I grew up in India, moved to the U.S. about 7 years back, and currently based in California.
That's awesome. So I definitely want to get into that. But, I moderated a panel at Stream TV in Denver back in June. So beginning of the summer. So I'm thrilled now to talk to you in a more in-depth way on this podcast here. But it really occurred to me when I saw you in June how much, first of all, you sort of captured and caught, the whole fast phenomenon, like lightning in a bottle, right? And have done phenomenally well in that space. And your company's grown by leaps and bounds. Maybe talk to that a little bit.
Sure, sure. When we started the company, maybe I'll give you take a step back and give you a background about how we started the company.
Yeah, let's do that. And then we'll go back a little further. We'll
Okay.
jump around. Doesn't have to be chronological.
Okay. So the three of us, Bhaskar, Vidya, and I, the three of us co-founded the company back in 2008, as you pointed out, Brian. This is our second company that we founded. We had co-founded along with a couple of others a company back in 1999 that was building Bluetooth technologies when Bluetooth had just started. One of the I don't know, three or four companies globally building Bluetooth stack and
Remember
license.
that was high tech stuff?
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, you'll be surprised how much effort there was to get different devices to talk to each other from different makers. I mean,
Yeah.
everything would break. You bring a phone and a headset, they just would not be able to communicate. Anyway, long story short, spent quite a bit of time there, about 6 years. We grew the company to be one of the largest in the Bluetooth technology space. Eventually got acquired by a Nasdaq listed company, which is now part of Qualcomm in 2006, stayed back for a couple of years in the company, did the transition, and 2008 we started Amagi.
And
Which
what was the original mission, Srini? Like where and how has it evolved till today? I mean, we'll get into that, but like what was the impetus to say, hey, you know what? Let's go found this different company in this space.
so again, when we started the company, we first decided that we will start the company and then figure out what we will do.
That's awesome. I can relate to that.
So we actually sat in a park, used to come in every day to a park, public park, sit and brainstorm ideas of saying, hey, what are the big technology trends? What is changing, and what would that mean, and where could we actually contribute? We were looking at essentially, areas where there were massive disruptions, massive changes that were happening,
Mhm.
and where technology can play a big role. We looked at a lot of things from, solar tech to mobile to and then we saw, I mean, this was in India, and we were looking at opportunities first and foremost to start with targeting Indian market.
Mhm.
And we thought at that point of time, this was 2008, again, just about YouTube had just started a couple of years back, again, pre-iPhone days, if you will, right? So we thought eventually television will get personalized,
Mhm.
and you will all see personal television. And so we actually filed our first patent in 2008 about being able to deliver personalized television and personalized advertising on your regular home screen TV. So we thought we'll
That
build.
was that was pretty you were really looking ahead at the future. I was. It's funny, most people don't know this, but I came out of telecom and mobile and networking space. That was kind of my background, and people don't maybe not remember this term, but triple play was, it was voice over IP, it was data, it was video in its infancy. And I saw the same thing. I didn't found a company like yours, but I really saw that video and how the innovation that was going to happen and the move to online was the future. So like, what made you think that?
No, it was clear that at some level, the traditional cable, was limited in terms of the amount of content that was coming in YouTube. You could see that people are watching on their mobile YouTube content. So people are starting to do that on the desktop, not necessarily mobile. Actually, at that point, it was more desktop, but
Yep.
people are watching.
But YouTube is like every time people think of like internet TV at the time, video outside of traditional cable and broadcast, they thought of YouTube. That was the first thing, right? User generated
Absolutely.
content.
Absolutely. Cats and dogs,
Yep.
right? But at IPTV, the some of the telcos started delivering services over IP, to your point, Brian, right? Triple play beyond cable can actually deliver over IP. So we thought eventually, if once IP comes in, once you're actually delivering content through a data pipe as opposed to an analog cable pipe,
Mhm.
you would have much more personalization and you would have you know content that you would like to watch rather than actually having this standard set of 200 channels that you actually have are forced to watch.
Right.
But one thing, we it was fairly obvious was it was too early. The market has just not there was just not there. So we actually quickly pivoted. While we started there, we ended up
Okay.
pivoting fairly quickly to eventually doing geo-targeted advertising in India, essentially enabling television networks to be able to insert localized ads at cable head ends
Mm-hmm.
and deliver local. Think about dealer ads in each
Yep.
market. Think about local SMB ads in each market. So pretty much that market did not exist in India at all. So we had to build tech that will actually sit at the cable head end. We had to go to the television networks in India, go buy inventory from them nationally, and then go to the cable operators, install the tech, and then go to the advertisers and sell the local ads. So pretty much end to end, do creatives for them
Wow.
because the market did not exist. So pretty much from all the way from tech to buying of inventory to selling of inventory, creating ads, everything that we had to end up doing. Grew to be one of the largest ad buyers in the market. About 35 networks, some of the largest networks, 3,000 plus advertisers on a monthly basis, and
You had your own marketplace, your own that's incredible. And back then, like who'd have known that advertising today is sort of the what's transformed to be, with all the fast and ad-based monetization strategy and stuff. But you guys were doing all that, right? End to end, way back in the day.
yeah, I mean, it was a pain, I should tell you that, trying to be everything, but pretty much we had to create the market. I mean,
Yes.
the market did not exist, so and ended up doing a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
It was fun. I mean, we were the fastest growing company in APAC and media for I don't know years in a row. By Deloitte, when Deloitte used to publish this year, we were growing at 2,000%, 3,000%. It was like explosive growth that we had. This we ran that for about 6 or 7 years, and then a couple of things happened. One, we realized that beyond a point, the growth was constrained because in India, 80% of the market was controlled by three or four networks, as in the US, right? Pretty much
Yeah.
the big networks control most of the inventory. And as we started growing, the inventory became more and more expensive for us to buy
Mhm.
because it was a captive market. And two, we saw channel conflicts potentially where the inventory was also being sold by the networks and by us as we started going up market to larger advertisers. Then there was channel conflict. And three, I think in 2016 or 2017, overnight, the Indian government made most of the cash illegal to weed out fake notes and such. So that pretty
Yeah.
much brought the entire business to a standstill. I mean, we had zero sales happening overnight, and we have massive minimum guarantees that we'd actually signed up for with the television
Oh,
networks.
that must have been I didn't know that about your corporate history. That must have been terrifying. You got all these mouths to feed, you got all these employees, you've been on this growth juggernaut, and you probably look in the mirror like, yeah, I'm pretty cool. Like we got this going on, and then all that sort of comes in a short period of time. I mean, this is literally crossing a chasm. How do you revector? How do you change up the company to more successful strategy? I don't know.
It was a tough time, really tough time. I mean, like completely the business came to a standstill. We weren't making any money. I mean, like, advertisers completely dried up overnight. Really tough time. So that's kind of, when you have a crisis, it brings tremendous focus. So got us to rethink the entire business strategy and said, hey, we have built this really cool tech. And from day one, we had built everything on the cloud, even before it
Yep.
was called cloud. At that
Smart.
time, it was
Yep.
called AWS hosted environments, right? So pretty much a really good tech, advanced tech on the cloud. We said, hey, we don't want to be left to the whimsical ups and downs of the market. Let's be a tech player rather than actually, doing this whole end-to-end stuff.
Okay.
So pivoted at that point of time to be a pure technology player where we'll actually license out technology rather than actually necessarily, do the whole market, if you will, buying
And
and
about
selling.
yeah, what year was that, Srini?
This was 2016, 17, early
Okay,
17.
wow. Okay, so that's like seven or so, 7, 8 years into Magi's corporate life cycle. Wow, that's impressive. Okay. And that's interesting because that's right around I think the time that we met. Grateful to you were sponsor of my OTT Executive Summit, and the fast thing was just starting to take off. So let's pick it up from there.
Yeah, yeah. No, so the transition was we ended up laying off, more than 50% of the company,
Oh
letting
wow.
go
Okay.
phenomenal guys. I mean, some people that have worked with us all through completely changed the model. Then we said, hey, I want to become a tech player. Let's take this tech and see how we can actually use this tech for delivering, channels, 24/7 channels to broadcasters and so on. So that's when I moved to the
And global too. That was
and
the other one.
globally. So I
Okay.
moved to the US in 2017
Okay.
to bring some of that in the US, and that's about the time when Fast was just starting to happen. It
Perfect
was
timing.
launched. So very, very, very initial. Pretty much very few platforms existed, if at all any. So we had this great tech. So we started talking to a couple of customers and saying, hey, here, this is something that can actually help you to create channels pretty much, within a day. You don't need to set up anything. It's all SaaS. You don't need to do anything. Just upload your content. Interestingly, the first set of customers that actually adopted Fast were digital first, digital native companies
Interesting.
that were born in the YouTube world. Companies
Mhm.
like Tastemade, companies like the Young Turks, that pretty much had never been in a traditional broadcast space, had completely been born in the YouTube world. So they knew SaaS, they knew cloud, so they were comfortable with that. So they could come in, upload their content, schedule stuff, and actually, bang, you have the fast channels up and running. So it was very, very. I mean, Brian, you probably know this very, very well. At that point of time, none of the television networks wanted to get into fast. They thought, hey,
No, it's can't gonna cannibalize their business model. Yeah, they were terrified.
it's too small, and I'm not
That
sure that
too.
I
Yeah.
want to give away my content that easily, and so on
Yep.
and so forth, right? So it was primarily driven by a lot of these digital first companies. So I think we were at the right place at the right time, I should say, and with the right tech. So kind of took off. I mean, completely like a rocket ship. So
Mhm.
2017, 2018, early set of customers starting to expand, and within I don't know, we had about a in the US about a 75x growth in the last 6 years or something like that.
That's awesome.
75 times. All right.
Yeah, I mean, just yeah, it's crazy. I've been following. I mean, as I said, I've been following your career and your company really since the beginning of this whole OTT juggernaut that's sort of taken off. And now, I mean, give yourself some credit. You're not just lucky. You've managed the inflection points. Sniffed out where the market was going, right, and adjusted and revectored appropriately and scaled things. So kudos to you, Srini. It's been a wild ride. So that kind of leads us maybe there's an interim part here story you want to tell, but kind of where you are today and maybe a company update and that kind of thing.
Sure, sure. So, yeah, that's how we started. And today we are the largest provider of fast technology in the market. Work with more than 1,000 media brands globally. You take any major media brand that you know of, it's extremely likely that we would be there would be our customers include the NBCs and the Foxes and the NBAs of the world, if you will, the biggest brands out
Mhm.
there, a whole bunch of studios, uh, sports, news, local stations, television networks, brands like Fremantle and Banijay that have tons and tons of IP, some of the largest IP owners globally. Work with them to help create their fast channels distributed to about 200 plus platforms today globally. I mean, as you know, fast is the hot thing across. So
Mhm.
tons and tons of new platforms launching across the globe. deliver it to them, and also we help monetize that. And obviously, the business that we started in 2017, I mean, Fast was actually instantly the fastest growing part of the business, but the much more stable and consistently growing part of the business has been actually enabling broadcasters and television networks to move their workflows to the cloud
Okay.
for their
So that whole
linear.
cloud infrastructure, sort of you built a platform on that, that was sort of like almost like your secret sauce, right? Like you were already kind of future proof, right? And so these broadcasters come on board and you already had a good solution for them.
Absolutely. And it's
Mhm.
been again, a fantastic journey on that side. We just won an award last month, this month actually, the CSI Innovation Award for jointly with NBC
I saw
for
that. It's
the work
amazing.
that we
Yep.
did for migrating their linear workflows to the cloud. So again, whether it's Sinclair moving their local station operations from on-prem infrastructure to cloud, or NBC running it for their linear or Peacock operations, I think it's been a fantastic journey working with broadcasters as they look at unifying their workflows, whether it's for fast, whether it's for linear. Ultimately, it's the same content they're actually using. Ultimately, at the back end, some could actually end up being on a fast channel, some could end up being on a linear channel, some could end up in both. So being able to do live news, live sports, whether it's for linear or for broadcast, helping them to, bring that cloud workflow, very efficient, effective workflow. That's what we actually focus on today.
Hmm.
Today we are in about, I think, 13 countries globally. Uh, uh, if you take the top 100 media brands globally, we work with more than two-thirds of them.
That's impressive.
Work
So
with
one of the
everyone.
challenges with growth, as you know, is like how do you manage that growth? You can't treat all customers the same way. As you started to like you talked about the digital players and now the broadcasters and international. What did you have to do to kind of segment your customer base and treat them kind of differently and uniquely? I mean, in your mind, what are those segments? That would be interesting.
Excellent question, Brian. So, one from, that we had tons and tons of challenges in terms of growth, right? It was explosive growth, and it was, obviously we had to scale the backend infrastructure to be able to support a lot of these customers. We scaled from about 200 people about 4 years back to about 1,000 plus people in the company to be able to support that. But as we look at our customer base, we use two types of segmenting. One is by use case because they tend to be unique use cases. So we have six segments within the company. We have news as a segment that actually focus on how do we actually build news workflows, because there are tons and tons of unique requirements in terms of I want to be able to do a breaking news right now. I want to be able to get a whole bunch of these three or four different feeds that are coming in from the ground and be able to combine all of them and be able to switch. I want live closed captioning. I have a whole bunch of things that are about around, and I want to have live tickers, weather updates, weather widgets, whole bunch of things that are actually very, very specific about news.
Okay.
We have a segment for sports, again, which comes with, I want to be able to create, I want extremely low latency. End-to-end latency has to be really, really
Mhm.
less. I want to be able to do sports betting on top. I want to be able to, do picture-in-picture ads, because many of these sports games, the only way you can actually monetize is by, sponsorships and because there are not too many mid-roll opportunities.
Mhm.
So sports comes with a whole bunch of different sort of challenges, and obviously very high SLAs. If I have to run an Olympics, or if I have to run a football game, or on the cloud. So
Mhm.
sports is the second segment. Three, we have segment for entertainment, which tends to be much more file based. There's not much of
So
live.
more VOD kind of type of.
Correct.
Okay. Yep.
And then we have a separate segment focusing on fast platforms, uh, because many of these fast platforms run their own channels. They want SSAI to be able to aggregate. They should be able to aggregate multiple third-party channels into their platform, do server-side ad insertion on them. Need a lot of analytics on how are these channels performing. Need a lot of metadata. A whole bunch of things around platforms that are unique for platforms, if you will.
So
That we
that's four, right?
That's four. And then we have a separate segment for strategic, which are our, large clients that have everything, that have news, that have
Well, I was
sports,
just going to
that have
ask that
entertainment.
because some of those use cases you just mentioned are, have different workflows, or maybe they have a combination of all those things. Do you treat them in those cases as four different customers, or because different departments maybe run, different? I mean, how do you structure that, I guess?
So for larger customer study, what we call as a strategic segment, both from a product and from a support perspective, we treat them as one single block, because
Okay.
the content tends to be, you record a live sports game and actually you end up using in your fast channel, right? You use it for your WOD, direct to consumer offering, and so on and so forth. So we treat them as a separate category because they also typically these large customers need SOC 2 compliance. They want extremely high security. They want very high. Some of them require 5.9 SLAs, 6.9 SLAs. So the kind of requirements that they would have would be very, very different. And they tend to run it on their own cloud as opposed to our cloud. But
Interesting. I was going to ask you that. Okay, that makes total sense, right?
tend to be very, very different. So we treat them as a category by themselves.
So you
And
might be willing to do more custom development for them as well, right?
they actually tend to have a lot of custom development because they have legacy workflows that they use that you have to integrate with. They have their own DevOps team that we should be able to train them and enable them to actually run and operate it themselves as opposed to running it on ours. So there's a whole bunch of customization that actually comes along with
It
them.
sounds like a big headache. I run product teams, and once you get into custom development and you get all these different tributaries, it can be tricky to manage all that, right? And then you want to feed all the innovation back to your core platform so everybody benefits, and then yeah. So that's a
Absolutely, absolutely. No,
good problem to
that's
have, right?
something. Yeah, no, that's a good problem to have, and we have something we have actually spent a lot of time thinking about and
Yeah.
structuring. Saying, how do you make our product modular so that we can actually still keep the core and actually be able to do this customization around the edges rather than in the core, and so that
Mhm.
we can actually start feeding in all of these changes into the core, as you're saying, and still be able to not have this monolithic behemoth
Right.
that's sitting in there. So structure to drive quick agile turnarounds for many of these customers by creating these modular components, if you will,
Mhm.
Brian. So those are the, and of course, we have a separate segment for Hispanic because that again, there's a whole bunch of thing
Yeah,
around
that's a good
code,
point. Yeah.
language, and so
Yeah.
these are the six segments that we actually look at as a company
Are
when
you
we
seeing
think
a lot of
about.
growth in like South America and the Hispanic US market as well? And okay.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, we've publicly announced, whether it's Globo, whether it's SBT, whether it's some of the largest broadcasters we work with today in South America. Brazil and Mexico have been very fast growing markets for us. Those have been the primary markets. We're starting to see some traction beyond those, but those are the two markets that have been high growth markets for us. Right.
So, a question for you now, it's sort of like more of a softer question, and thank you for this. This is really interesting. I didn't know all this stuff actually about some of the inflection points you made in your corporate history and stuff. But like you've had to, first of all, I've always known this about you. You sort of project this enthusiasm, right, about your job, about your work, about your business. It doesn't seem mechanical to you. It doesn't seem like it's just, you're trying to get deals. You've got a passion about you, and that's amazing. And I think that's helped you get through some of these strategic inflection points of the company when you're facing adversity. How do you inculcate that as a culture in your growing business so that your team also does that, right? Because as you get bigger, you got to processize things, right? And you can get a little set in your ways. Can you talk to that a little bit?
Excellent question, Brian. Excellent question, actually. Right. So ultimately, your passion comes from your underlying faith that you're doing something bigger than yourself, bigger than not for the money, but for actually doing something that will actually will hopefully leave a legacy or do something that can be much larger than what you'd have done otherwise. So in that sense, being able to align together as a company as a vision, saying, "Hey, here is something that a unique opportunity, window of opportunity as the media landscape changes for us to be able to, become that underlying infrastructure, enable our media customers to seamlessly work across different business models, whether it's again, if we don't even know today, a decade back, it was all cable. Cable was the big thing. Now it's
Yeah.
fast. Tomorrow, I don't know what it's going to be. That's going to change. But how do you
Yes.
actually build an infrastructure that can actually, stand the test of time, if you will? There is a window of opportunity where, as this disruption happens, I think there's a very, very interesting window of opportunity for us to become the player in the media tech space to become that underlying infrastructure. I mean, if you look at, I mean, unlike most other industries, media is so fragmented from a tech perspective. I mean,
Totally.
for
Yes.
every single part, oh, you want to ingest, okay, here is a specific vendor. You want to do this, I have vendor B. I was at IBC, the IBC conference earlier this year. It's like amazing that you have like what 10,000 companies exhibiting there. So
And 10,
fragmented.
10 of the same company doing the same thing. It was one of the services I do a little bit less now is vendor selection, where, someone will come and say, I want to build this new platform or whatever. And it's just a cluster. You get all these different companies and they kind of vet them, and, some have patents, some don't. It's just, you're right. There's a benefit in being able to kind of provide an integrated platform. That being said, how do you keep the innovation going, right? How do you keep innovating, doing new things, finding those new opportunities, and how do you make that sort of a part of the culture?
Yeah, so the key part that we have been trying to work with the team is how do we actually build a sense of ownership so that everyone in the company feels that hey, it's their own startup that they're actually running and they're looking out for opportunities. They're looking for everybody's an entrepreneur. How do you actually get that to the, from a core culture perspective, everybody feels, hey, this is my company. I have to go figure out what to do next. And that comes with, I mean, it's easy to say words like ownership, right? If we don't enable them with sufficient freedom to be able to either make mistakes or even make decisions so that they're not looking up to somebody. I think that's something we have been very conscious about, intentional about saying, how do we, we used to call ourselves saying it's, being different, but, having the freedom to be being different. How do you get
Yes.
a set of people that are eclectic, that are different, and be comfortable about their difference? I mean, we talk about diversity and such, but I mean, I mean, to us, it's much, much more than just, diversity as in we don't look the same, we don't, walk the same, talk the same, but it's much more about how we are comfortable with being very, very different. And it's not just about race or gender or color or any of that, right?
Mhm.
It certainly could be about that, but it could be much, much more than that. So that you
No, I
can
get your point.
have.
Is people throw the diversity word out like, it's just, it's kind of a catchphrase or whatever, but it means something, right? And for you, maybe it is innovation. Maybe it is looking at different perspectives and feeding that back into the culture and into how you, serve customers and everything. I think that's really important. I think you're onto something.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And we've also consciously built a culture of people willing to confront. People can come in and tell me that I'm an idiot, right? So being comfortable and being able to question, not agree to what somebody else is saying, just because it's somebody senior in the company,
All
right?
right.
So
Well, listen, we covered your career background, company update. I'm conscious of the fact my audience would love to, pick your brain a little bit about what some of the trends are in the industry, and you seem to be very good at navigating those inflection points, those changes in the industry. Where are we right now as an industry? What are the big trends? And if you can talk to maybe a couple little things that we as an industry are going to need to navigate and kind of maybe make a prediction about how things are going to, go in the future. I'd love to kind of tap into your sort of crystal ball a little bit.
sure, sure, right. I'll tell you my hypothesis. I know that it's a crystal ball, but certainly I'll tell you my hypothesis. So the previous decade from a media perspective has been about, "Hey, I'm going to build my direct to consumer business. Everything is going to be my D2C business. I'm moving away from, becoming from a linear to a D2C streaming business." I think the next decade and probably the next few decades, if you will, would be not about keeping my content, creating my content and distributing it myself, but actually taking it into as many places as possible.
Okay. So
Think
walled
about
gardens coming down and sort of more everybody stays in their lane, focus on telling a good story, creating good content, right?
the separation of roles of
Okay.
somebody who creates good content and somebody who distributes good content, right? So that role was, we're trying to blend both of them into a single person, single entity with a direct to consumer business. I'm creating my own content. I have my own app. I'm going to reach my own consumer and I'm going to deliver it vertically integrated. That
Right.
I think is a very inefficient model.
Yes.
Both from a cost perspective and also from, bundle from a customer perspective, where you actually have to buy from 10 different guys for 10
Okay.
different content. I think as bundling happens at the front end, for consumers, it becomes much more convenient. At the back end, it also becomes much more cost effective for
Mhm.
people then can focus on not necessarily acquiring consumers and supporting consumers, but actually building great content. I think that's
And
the
people forget. I mean, you mentioned the cost factor alone. We've duplicated. We recreated the wheel. We've duplicated cost 100 times over for DTC, and it was I don't know, an ego issue, a boardroom issue, a control issue, or whatever. But like literally, we took what was fairly efficient with a small number of broadcasters, cable companies, streamers, or whatever, to being something very fragmented, very inefficient from a cost perspective. So all right, how do we put that genie back in the bottle where everybody benefits?
No, I think it's now fairly obvious, right? Pretty much every media company is starting to, Fast is a classic example where people are saying, I'm going to take my content, I'm going to put it outside
Okay.
through some third-party platforms. And we are starting to see more and more cross-licensing happening, whether it's between Netflix and Warner Bros. Discovery and so on and so forth. So
Hmm.
I think the world is going to get much more complex as consumers will have more devices, more formats, short form, long form, linear, fast, AWOD, SWOD, TWOD. You're going to have multiple different formats, multiple different devices in which consumers are going to, consume content. And I think every content owner has to be, ready to be able to distribute this across different devices, across different formats, across different platforms. And with AI, Gen AI, more
Okay.
likely
I
than not,
knew this was going to come up. All right. So how is AI going to save us here?
more countries. No, I'm not saying, I'm saying first and foremost, it means that content, content that otherwise was not accessible to me,
Yes.
subtitling, because the subtitling and dubbing used to be one of the most expensive,
Yeah.
costs from taking content outside the country, right? So all of that is going to become much, much, much cheaper. That means that content is going to travel across countries much, much more. So a lot more content is going to be global in nature now,
So
right?
localization will be a much more efficient process that takes a lot of cost out. Okay.
So eventually you're going to you have to prepare as a content owner, as a media owner, to be able to deliver to a global audience across different formats, different platforms, different regions, different cultures. And that's something that we are hoping as Amagi to build an infrastructure towards, as
Do you
delivery
look,
is going to
does
become
a
a larger problem
Magi
than
take a hit
content.
there though? Because in some sense you may have less customers, right? What if we move to a model where there's a million different content creators, production companies telling the stories, right? And they're good at what they're doing. They're creatives. Stay in your lane, as your point is. There's always going to be a ton of different fragmented devices, right? No one's going to give up on that. You've got the CTV wars, and you've got smartphones, and you've got the big screen in the home, whatever. The middle is really where I see a lot of contraction and consolidation because for that infrastructure, it doesn't make sense to have 1,000 companies go in DTC. It should be more like a content clearinghouse, a few companies maybe delivering, maybe throw a little blockchain in there to, and regulation around privacy, whatever, getting out there. But where does Amagi play in that future world?
So we see ourselves as the pipe that takes the content
Okay.
that is created by these creators and deliver to all of these different platforms. And that's going to become even larger and larger and more important as we look at, explosion of devices on one side, explosion of content creation on the other side, Brian.
So you'd be in the middle, but again, to my point, you'll probably have less customers, right? Because there'll have to be some contraction in the industry, right? It's not sustainable right now.
No, you would, okay, again, the way I would think about this, Brian, is that very much like what we are seeing on the advertising world, supply path optimization, you're going to see content path optimization, that you don't need to have multiple intermediaries sitting in between. But
Yeah.
having said that, the number of people that create content is going to explode. So you're going to
Okay.
have tons and tons of more content creators on one side, content owners, content creators that actually are building fantastic content. And you have tons and tons of devices on the other side. So both of these sides are exploding. We are hoping that being the pipe in between, taking all of these multiple content owners to deliver to multiple platforms. Again, each one of them, depending on the audience, you want to be able to deliver the right content at the right time, in the right device, in the right
Yeah.
format. That's the job that we think, I think our customer base will dramatically increase with this
And you've
fragment.
built the scale, you built the low latency, you've built all that other stuff. You've been doing that for years now. And I guess it's some way in the fast business model, which it looks as the future, it doesn't matter, right? Because you have the, explosion of content, you're going to monetize it anyway. It doesn't really matter. Like, I mean, it does matter because along the way, the value chain all needs to be taken care of financially. But from your perspective, it doesn't matter if there's, a million, titles across a million customers or a million titles across 10 customers.
Absolutely. The number of titles will go up for
Yes.
sure. And I think with the democratization of these pipes, with more platforms, I think actually it'll be million customers as well, or
Mhm.
hundreds of thousands of customers, because now suddenly you are this tiny company sitting somewhere in Santa Monica, being able to deliver to an audience that is actually watching you in Croatia,
Sure.
not just on YouTube, but on a whole bunch of other platforms that are now opening up all of the third party content. Brian.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just thinking it's kind of the social, I thought everybody has those crazy accounts, where I think my new latest craze is otters. There's some Instagram channels that just otters are the coolest. I would love to have one for a pet. So I'm like totally addicted to otters right now. You could have Otter TV, right? I mean, and it can get a global audience. In the past, you couldn't get that scale, right? It didn't make economic sense, especially if you're building your own DTC platform. You're saying this opens up a whole cornucopia of content in a very efficient way.
Beyond YouTube. Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. Now you're
Yeah.
going to see hundreds of YouTubes. I mean, that sense of for professional, not for UGC, but lots and lots of platforms. Every telco. We are now working with dozens of telcos that are actually looking to add third-party fast content as a fast front porch into their traditional cable TV offering, for example, right? So you're going to see this, again, all of these telcos, your mobile, operators, your device OEMs, all of them opening up third-party content because suddenly it's a service business beyond a device business. So now they're able to
It's a
build.
service business. The other thing, we kind of danced around this a little bit, is the importance of data in the future world, right? Because all of this data, whether it's metadata and tagging, whether it's consumer behavior, whether it's ad tech, performance, unified measurement, all that other fun stuff. Tell me about Amagi's data strategy and the role that's going to play in the future.
Uh, there are three types of data, if you will, Brian. One is data about the content, metadata, right? I mean, what does it say? How popular is it? Whole bunch of stuff around the content. The second is data around the users. Who's watching? Where are they watching? When are they watching? Which device are they using to watch? And how long are they watching? And so on and so forth. The third is advertiser data, right? You know, what sort of ads are actually getting traction? You
Mm.
know, what are the ads that my users are switching away from? How long are they watching, and so on and so forth. So we see these three are three data pillars that we're actually building towards. What you're essentially built is an underlying across all our fast platforms. Now we have an underlying data warehouse that can actually, again, we hope to as part of a being an industry cloud, an underlying data infrastructure will have common vocabulary. One of the problems that we have across the industry is that because you're using hundreds of different tools, or you take, you enter some data in some format when you're acquiring content about the content. By the time it gets to an end Nielsen, it's a very, very different vocabulary terminology that we actually end up using, and you have no way to cross correlate. Hey, here's
Right.
the script that I got, and here's the money that I spent for that content, and here is what I earned across all of these different formats. So we're hoping to unify some of that with the common underlying infrastructure. And data is going to become very, very critical, both in terms of making decisions on where I want to invest, where do I actually distribute, what do I market, and where do I, earn money from to be able
Yes.
to, make those decisions, but also to be able to provide better insights, better recommendations for consumers at the end of the day as well.
Yeah, and I think you hit it on the head, Srini. You've got the triangle, right? You've got the content data, metadata, you've got consumer behavior, and you've got advertising. That's, basically the lifeblood of this industry in terms of revenues and such. And it's really aligning those three in the most optimal way so the consumer gets a good experience, they get relevant ads, the advertiser and the brands, they're getting, increased return on ad spend. And of course, the content folks are finding the right audience and stuff. So that's interesting. We could talk about that alone for hours in the role of AI and sort of helping, sort of grease the skids, so to speak, to make it all more efficient, human curation, everything. But we're almost out of time here. One of the things we like to do in this podcast, Rennie, is to personalize some of the leaders in the industry like yourself. Can you share with our audience? I find you such a fascinating person, again, because of your enthusiasm and, it's not just business too, it's passionate. But you got to have some hobbies outside of work too, right? Can you share with us an interest or a hobby to our audience?
It's much more prosaic, Brian, that I don't have anything fancy. I mean, I spend most of my free time reading books.
Okay.
That's my single biggest. You ask my family, they say, "Hey, he's always curled up reading a book." I know. So
So
that's
a physical book, a Kindle, like what's
I
your
have both.
preferred
I
mean?
have both, depending on what I can. I mean, when I travel, I take Kindle, but when at home, I prefer to have something physical.
Any particular genres or authors that you like the most or?
No, I actually, I like to read wide from history to philosophy to, science to stuff. I mean, a book that I'm right now reading is recommended by my colleague. Very interesting book, for example, Material World. It's about mining and minerals and how physical materials, while we think about all of this data, virtual compute and stuff like that, how much does, iron and silicon
Oh,
and
you mean physical mining? Like,
physical
oh,
mining,
that's so
right?
interesting.
Not
You're
your
right
head.
because I mean, I know that we know this from the telecom world is, a lot of the lexicon came from the railroad industry, switching and all these other things. And, if we look at now, data mining and, Bitcoin and all that fun stuff, like this idea of mining, right? It's kind of old school, but is that the theme of the book?
That's the theme of the book. It talks about how we underestimate the power of these physical materials when we talk about all of this growth coming in from all of this tech and computer infrastructure, how day-to-day physical materials and what it does to climb to the environment and such, right? It's amazing the journey of from all the way from mining to the time it actually we use that material.
That's really
Book
cool.
by
We're gonna have
Connie,
to include
fantastic
that in
book.
the comments here so people can. I want to read that book. That sounds awesome. That's
Uh,
good. So listen, Srini, this has been a great conversation. I really appreciate your time. I'm sure I'll see you around. I'm not going. Are you going to NAB New York? I'm sort of 50-50 on that.
I'm 50-50 on that as well.
Yeah. So, but we'll see each other this fall. Really appreciate your time and your insights. We could talk for hours. And yeah, so thanks for your time today, Srini.
Not at all. Thank you, Brian. As always, it's fantastic talking to you. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, listen, once again, this is Brian Mahoney, CEO of Trend Research, president of the OTT Executive Community. On behalf of OTT Executive Podcast and Srini, thanks everybody for tuning in.
Thank you.